The first week of preseason action is in the books, and we have you covered with all the fantasy football knowledge that you need to help you dominate your leagues. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Jamie Eisenberg, that's Dave Richard, that's Heath Cummings. We have a lot of preseason action to cover, and unfortunately a lot of injuries to deal with. We got news today that Matthew Stafford not practicing. He was expected to practice, so I thought we were going to have some good news to talk about. We have some bad news to start with the injuries to a couple of running backs. Not so bad in the situation in Tampa, a little bit worse with the situation in Tennessee. So Tyjae Spears, we'll start right there, dealing with a high ankle sprain, left in the second quarter of the game in Tampa Bay. Expected to miss probably several weeks. We don't have the full diagnosis of how long he's going to be out. I'll start with you, Dave. What does this mean for this Tennessee backfield with Spears and Tony Pollard?
Well, I'll tell you what it meant last year, because there were 5 games last year that Tyjae Spears missed, and Tony Pollard was the main guy. He averaged about 14 PPR points per game. He had 3 games with at least 14.7 PPR points per game. Certainly a guy who can carry the workload for Tennessee. And I wonder a little bit about Tyjae Spears and how effective he'll be when he does come back. We've seen so many players with a high ankle sprain, when they return, they're not the same guy. So this could be the pathway that Tony Pollard needs to finish the year as maybe even like a top 15 fantasy running back.
And it's a guy that battled a lot of injuries last year. And so we've heard from the Titans all offseason, we want to share the work between these two more. We want more touches for Tyjae Spears. At some point, they may get the impression, maybe we shouldn't give this guy more touches. It's such a hard time staying healthy. I think Pollard has kind of existed right on the edge of that RB2 range, a high-end flex, or just inside the top 24. For now, I've got him solidly as an RB2 and someone that I think quite a discount if he's going to get 60% of the touches there in Tennessee.
I was a little nervous about Pollard, prior to this, just based on everything you said, Heath, that we were expecting to see this. And last year we saw when Pollard and Spears were healthy, Pollard was not at his best. You gave the numbers of what the 5 games were. He actually had 7 games where he played at least 73% of the snaps. And in 4 of those, he had some pretty exceptional games, 4 of those being of the 5 that
line
Spears
for that
out.
again.
And so, again, it does not mean Spears is out for the rest of the season. Does not mean that Spears is going to miss even week 1 at this point, but just something to consider when we're factoring in what Tony Pollard could do. Let's go to the situation in Tampa Bay where we have Rachaad White considered day-to-day with the groin injury. He actually got injured on the carry before he left the game. So he got hurt on a 12-yard run, then stayed in the game, had a 3-yard run, came off the field, and obviously is now dealing with this groin injury. Todd Bowles said over the weekend he was going to get more tests, met with the media today and said day-to-day. So, Heath, when you look at Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, and Sean Tucker, who they've been talking up quite a bit, how do you factor in all these 3 guys for Tampa Bay's backfield?
I don't think for the injury purposes I'll probably make any adjustments for at least a week. If Rachaad White could be back in the next week, and if he is, I'm sorry he hurt his groin, but it probably doesn't matter for the football season. The interesting thing is how every time it seems like they talk about the running backs, the name Sean Tucker comes up. Because we saw Bucky Irving kind of take this job from Rachaad White last year, and White was still active on passing downs, but not very effective as a rusher. Tucker has been exceptionally effective as a rusher the few times he's touched the football. So I've gotten more of the feeling that maybe we're not going to get a top 5 season from Bucky Irving. Still a good low-end RB1. White and Tucker both worth picking in the double-digit rounds.
Do you remember the game last year at New Orleans?
Week 6.
Big blowout game for Tampa. Sean Tucker had a monster game. He had almost 200 total yards, 2 touchdowns in the game. You know what he did the rest of the season?
Nothing.
Oh, well, he scored 1 touchdown the rest of the season, but basically nothing. Didn't help anybody in fantasy football. Instead, this coaching staff made the decision to stick with Bucky Irving, and he went up to the moon. He was outstanding. And so I see Bucky Irving the exact same way that you do, Heath. I'm nervous about taking Sean Tucker. I love the talent. I think he's great. I don't know how much he's going to play. Rachaad White's no better than a bench guy for me.
I do think the value for Rachaad White prior to the injury, so if he is okay, is round 10 based on his ADP.
Right.
And so they've been talking up, still using him. He's been the 3rd down back. He's got 3 straight seasons of 50 catches, 2 straight seasons of 9 total touchdowns. So there's still a lot to like about what his role can be. Now, granted, the end of the season versus the beginning of the season last year, totally different. So Rachaad White was a big part of the offense, phased out as they went into their playoff run. I think the big concern would be, though, is does Sean Tucker get some touches?
Well, I think the other side of that might be, like, we're talking about a Rachaad White getting dinged up right now, but if something happens to Bucky Irving, I don't think we see Rachaad White become a workhorse running back. I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Tucker takes the majority of the Bucky Irving touches and Rachaad White stays in his role.
So in a deep league, if you've got Bucky Irving, you're not getting Rachaad White, you're getting Sean Tucker with a pick even later than you would get Rachaad White. Is that what you're doing? That's what I would do.
Before we move on to some other positions, just one note. Alexander Mattison suffered a season-ending neck injury, so the Dolphins are working out Jamal Williams. We'll see how that goes, but Devon Etienne firmly locked in as a potential first-round pick, maybe even for Heath, a number one overall pick, but a first-round pick for sure for Devon Etienne. Certainly, if you're getting him in round 2, it's a great value. And Jaylen Wright looks like he's going to be locked in as the number 2 guy there for the Dolphins. Jayden Reed's in a walking boot, so we found out this news over the weekend, did not play in the preseason game for the Packers. Could be out until week 1. So, Dave, when you hear this, Matthew Golden's had a fantastic camp so far. Romeo Dobbs quietly has had a fantastic camp so far. We know Dontavian Wicks is there. Christian Watson's trying to come back. Savion Williams, another rookie that they drafted in the 3rd round. Golden was in the 1st round. How do you sort of view the Packers wide receivers right now with this news about Jayden Reed?
Golden is the one I want the most.
Yep.
And it looked good in the preseason game. He was getting away with speed. He was certainly running good routes. He drew a penalty on Sauce Gardner. Gardner couldn't contain him. And when you see Sauce Gardner running after somebody, that's a good sign that you know what you're doing out there and that you've got the speed to play in the NFL. So it looks like we're getting the Matthew Golden from his last 10 games at Texas. And that's a different guy than what we saw when he played at Houston and his early time in Texas. And if that's who the Packers are getting, then fantasy managers should target this guy because I think he's got a chance to have a really good year. Maybe finish, I don't want to say top 20, but could be close to there if he's the true number 1 guy. Jayden Reed I'll still draft, but it's going to be for my bench in the double-digit rounds.
I've actually moved Dobbs ahead of Reed for now, and it was kind of a back and forth last year. Reed's so much more exciting, but Dobbs is the guy they want to have on the field all the time, and that really does matter. It seems like Jayden Reed, even when he's healthy now, locked into that slot-only role, and it's probably going to be Golden and Dobbs when it's 2 wide receiver sets. So I think I'm looking at Dobbs early in round 10, Reed late in round 10.
Yeah, in terms of Golden, I'm taking him right now over Chris Godwin. I'm taking him over Chris Olave. The upside right now for what he could be and the way Jordan Love has looked, and we know they want to throw the ball a little bit more. Last year, Love dealing with 2 separate injuries, which really impacted their pass attempts. So there's a lot to like about where Matthew Golden can be. Hopefully Jayden Reed can be as well, but we'll see what happens in terms of his injury.
You're saying round 7 on Golden?
I'm almost there. Yeah,
I'm there.
I think it's just at that point. And then in case of Matthew Stafford, so we were expecting him to be back at practice. They were going to tell you all these glorious things about the Rams passing attack being okay, Puka Nacua fine, no issues with Davante Adams. I'm still a little bit concerned because if Stafford went through a workout on Saturday, apparently threw 60 passes, no complaints, no issues. Now maybe it's just maintenance, making sure he's okay, but we know he's got this aggravated disc in his back. How are you guys approaching really the Rams receivers? Because Stafford hasn't been over 20 fantasy points since 2021, so he's really just an afterthought.
I don't laugh, but I think the nice thing is they've got Jimmy Garoppolo. The difference at this stage in Matthew Stafford's career and Jimmy Garoppolo is smaller than the difference between most good starting quarterbacks and their backup. So I did move Puka Nacua behind Malik Neighbors. So Nacua is now down to my wide receiver 5. I haven't moved Adams that much because we're already kind of discounting him based on the fact that he's a 32-year-old wide receiver, and we worry about that. These guys have the potential, when Matthew Stafford's healthy, to both be top 12 wide receivers. This has always been an extremely concentrated passing attack. So a ton of targets for both of them, and maybe it's a 10% decrease in fantasy production if they drop from Stafford to Garoppolo for a few weeks.
Would it ease either of your concerns if you knew that Jimmy Garoppolo torched the Cowboys in a joint practice and Davante Adams was his top target, and the Cowboys could not cover Davante Adams? Would that make you feel a little bit better about Davante?
Listen,
make you feel a little bit better about Puka?
I think the fact that Garoppolo is where he is is much more comforting than where he was. And meaning in Las Vegas with that coaching staff was tough to deal with. And Davante Adams will tell you that.
Right.
And then to see him go through potentially the Rams car wash, which has been great, similar to the Vikings car wash. Anytime you go through these situations where you've been better coached, better system, better players around you, obviously the Adams-Garoppolo relationship is going to be something we have to keep an eye on. But yes, Heath, your point, I think that Garoppolo is in one of the better situations, and hopefully that will benefit, obviously, all of the Rams. I am with you, though. I'm a little bit more concerned about Puka just because where he's coming from. I'm not avoiding him. I'm not trying to not draft him, but he's right there with Nico Collins and Malik Neighbors and Amon-Ra St. Brown and A.J. Brown and all these high-end wide receivers that could easily be better than him.
Right.
And Adams, I think, brings him down a little bit. So he's actually a late round 1 pick for me. Not as much concerned about the Stafford injury, more so about the Adams situation and just what he can become. So we'll hopefully get Matthew Stafford back at practice, but did not practice, at least according to reports, on Monday. Before we take a break, got a new studio. What do you guys think about our new dig so far?
I love it, dude. We've got our trophies from some of our fantasy leagues. Heath is psyched about the Chiefs helmet in the back.
Right next to the Super Bowl trophy where it belongs.
We're going to be doing a lot of shows from here. We're
I
really
don't think it
excited
belongs
about
there
it.
this past year.
Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. We're excited about our new studio. We're excited about the rest of our show. Stay tuned to us right here on Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. We're talking about some running back battles that may give us some clarity, may give us some more confusion based on what we saw in the preseason, at least the first preseason week worth of action. Let's talk about the Broncos. They played the San Francisco 49ers, and we saw prior to the game, it was R.J. Harvey, 5th on the depth chart. He was going to be behind Audric Estime, behind Jaleel McLaughlin, behind Blake Watson, whoever that is, nobody knows.
I know Blake Watson.
Behind J.K. Dobbins as well. But he ended up starting, playing 67% of the snaps, and he got 100% of the rush attempts with the first-team offense. J.K. Dobbins played on obvious passing downs. So, Dave, since you know everybody in the Broncos backfield well, how do we sort of take this information and use it moving forward? Is it clear now Harvey is the guy, and how soon would you draft him over Dobbins?
First of all, he's going to go like 5 rounds ahead of J.K. Dobbins, in my opinion. I was nervous about J.K. Dobbins taking a lot of rushes away from R.J. Harvey. And this preseason game kind of invigorated me to be more excited about R.J. Harvey, and he could dominate first and second downs, and then J.K. Dobbins plays third downs, and that makes a lot of sense. There was a play in this game where he bounced outside, and he literally outran every 49ers defender to the edge to win the edge.
Did you like that, though? Because that made me a little...
Why didn't he hit the hole?
Yeah.
The hole was taken away from him.
I like it, but I didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like when they bounce too much.
I didn't mind that he bounced it outside. I love the speed.
Yeah.
And I think that Sean Payton loved the speed. And sure, maybe he's got a little bit of work too. I think that offensive line for Denver really didn't play their best game. I think that will get better because we expect them to be one of the best offensive lines. R.J. Harvey is a round 5 pick for me. I like him better than Treveyon Henderson. I think he's going to be an outstanding back who's going to get a lot of work in this Denver offense.
So I don't think anybody should have taken anything at all from the depth chart. It was meaningless.
Of course, they're always meaningless.
We didn't care. I'm also not sure how much we should take from the first preseason game when we're talking about a rookie running back that they want to get a look at versus a veteran who's had an extensive injury history and they pretty much know who he is. I kind of feel like the extensive use of Harvey was more, let's get the young guy in there, see what he does, see what maybe we can coach out of him in the next couple of weeks. So I'm still expecting a pretty good split in this backfield, but definitely Harvey first, and by several rounds. I would take Harvey in end of round 4, start of round 5, still behind Henderson and Hampton.
He's a round 4 pick for me now. And I think just, you guys are probably taking the more cautious approach.
Yeah.
Harvey was my second favorite rookie running back when he was drafted.
Right.
Okay.
So I liked him better than Hampton because of the situation. Now, obviously, Hampton with Najee Harris and how that's all unfolded, and then the addition of J.K. Dobbins. So I'm kind of right back where I was following the NFL draft, if this is going to be the potential usage. And I think there's a world, based on how Sean Payton's offense operates, and we've seen this once upon a time, where both Harvey and Dobbins can be good. But you have Dobbins with the injury history, and if we get that stretch of games where Harvey is the featured guy, obviously it goes the same the other way if Harvey misses any time, but this could be exceptional. And the fact that he didn't play on passing downs did not make me nervous because this is an offense, especially with Bo Nix and Sean Payton, they'll throw to their running backs on first and second down. So I love R.J. Harvey. I'm with you. I like him slightly ahead of Henderson. But Henderson also is very exciting as well. So we saw that preseason game against the Commanders. Now, Dave, you spent some time in practice, joint practice between the Patriots and Commanders. But Stevenson still handled 83% of the carries. Henderson, however, the 100-yard kickoff return, he had 60% of Drake May's pass attempts in terms of the targets going to players. That's where 60% of them went to was to.
Well, if he keeps that up, then he's probably going to be RB1 for the season.
Probably so.
Yeah.
But in terms of your estimation of Henderson, are you overexcited based on what you saw because of the speed, or are you just sort of dialing it back based on what you saw in practice?
I'm actually dialing it back based on what I expect this Patriots run game to look like, and it's the entire track record of Josh McDaniels' 17 seasons as a play caller in the National Football League. And most of that time, he's used a running back that's around 220 pounds to lead the charge. He does have a second running back that he uses in the passing game. Think of James White. Think about Deion Lewis. Those guys could be the role that Treveyon Henderson fills at the beginning of the year. But we know that Rhamondre Stevenson, as decent as he looked in the preseason game, and he looked decent enough in the practice too, he's got a fumbling issue. And if he starts to fumble too much, 2 times might be too much in New England, Treveyon Henderson can make inroads on being a 3-down player in that offense. And that's something worth getting excited about. The talent is undeniable. He's fantastic. but I get nervous about trusting him in an offense where Josh McDaniels has never really veered from this 220-pound running back, this physical between the tackles running back, leading the way. If that changes, all systems are go, and Treveyon Henderson could end up being a top 12 fantasy running back by the time the season ends.
But there's a couple of ways that you can overcome not being that 220-pound pack who gets all of the early downs touches, and that is handling 60% of the team's passing work, and it won't be that. But it could be 6 or 7 targets a game for the running back. We've seen that before. And so
nothing weird happening behind you right now, by the way.
Other thing is
God didn't like your Treveyon Henderson.
God's taking Treveyon in round 1,
Yes.
maybe. No, he's not. I'm sorry, Heath. You didn't notice, but like the screen was.
the other thing is it's not just passing game work, which is huge in PPR, obviously, but it's explosive plays.
Yeah.
And it's the 100-yard kickoff return. It's the 1 carry for 18 yards.
It's true.
Like, he might just be so good that, no, he's not stylistically the exact type of running back Josh McDaniel likes to use, but touches the ball 12 times a game and turns it into 15 fantasy points.
It looked, it feels, it could be like what we saw Jahmyr Gibbs as a rookie, where it just was all of a sudden he just started building momentum. Then Montgomery missed that time, and it was like, we're not taking this guy off the field. So he just has that much explosiveness. The thing that I like, you said this today, and I'm total agreement with you. You moved Henderson ahead of James Cook.
Yep.
I have Henderson and Harvey ahead of James Cook at this point. Like, his hold-in situations making me nervous. I put both rookies ahead of Alvin Kamara at this point, or ahead of James Conner at this point. Like, I'm all in. So round 4 for me, for both these guys, I'm excited. And I also put them ahead of Breece Hall, who I'm very nervous about, because we saw Hall in what looks like a full-blown committee as the Jets took on the Green Bay Packers here. They were rotating Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. Now, Heath, I know you're not as concerned yet, but this has been the narrative all offseason since the owners' meeting. Aaron Glenn, the new head coach for the Jets, says we're going to use multiple guys. And you've heard just this constant drumbeat of Braylon Allen. And we know the Detroit coaching staff offensively is here. And it could be, hopefully, Hall in the Jahmyr Gibbs role, but almost certainly Braylon Allen in the David Montgomery role. So touchdowns could be a problem. Receptions could be a problem. I'm nervous about Breece Hall.
I am nervous about how we used to view him as a potential top 5 running back, maybe. But I do think the receptions will not be a problem. Josh Reynolds is the number 2 wide receiver on this team. Mason Taylor, who made a huge splash at camp, is now on the shelf for probably the next couple of weeks, so he's not going to make the strides he needs to. I think there's a decent chance that Breece Hall is second on this team in targets this year.
But just in terms of that,
right.
I think when people hear that, and I get it,
right.
They may think what we saw year 2 for him,
right,
when he was a 70-plus catch guy. I don't think you're meaning that.
No, but in today's environment, and then running back catches just seem to go down year after year after year, I think he could be a top 5 guy in terms of receptions at the position. Justin Fields is the running quarterback, which isn't great for pass-catching running backs, but Justin Fields also checks down more than just about any running quarterback we've ever seen. And they don't have a good number 2 wide receiver. So when teams double-team Garrett Wilson and take that away, I'm not sure you're going to have a better option than dumping it off to Hall. And the other thing is, like you mentioned, Treveyon Henderson could be Jahmyr Gibbs. And it's not the Detroit Lions who score 75 touchdowns a year, so it'd be Jahmyr Gibbs with fewer touchdowns. That's kind of what I'm hoping for Breece Hall, is that Jahmyr Gibbs role, just not as many touchdowns.
I think Braylon Allen outshined Breece Hall in the preseason game. And it's one game, and it's a preseason game, and you don't want to overreact because when people do that in your fantasy league and they overreact to stuff, like that's when you're going to find good value in your draft. So let them overreact. You should not overreact. I don't think we should overreact. But, man, Braylon Allen did look good. And the thing that really came true is, like, Aaron Glenn's been talking about using 3 running backs all offseason long. Isaiah Davis was working third downs. So they could really see a split between Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. The more I think about it, the more I absolutely do not want Breece Hall on my fantasy team. I have him in round 4 right now. I think that's too soon.
Oh, he's around.
I'm going to have to make a move. I'm sure you've got him in round 5.
He's a round 5 pick. I've been nervous the entire offseason because of Fields and the rushing touchdowns that he could take away from
that's another
Breece Hall.
factor.
The receptions, again, I think the ceiling just comes down a little bit because I do think people, when they're drafting him to be that 70-plus catch guy. And then this Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis switch, which I didn't expect it to be as maybe prominent as it could be. I thought Aaron Glenn was just more coach speak. I think to your point, though, about overreacting in preseason, when we hear something and hearing something and then
that's
seeing
one thing.
something.
That's another.
And that kind of is problematic. Now, that goes to our next one, which is Jacksonville, which all we heard for the last few weeks, or at least the first couple weeks, is Tank Bigsby working with the starters. Bigsby looks like the guy. And then we get to the preseason game for them as they take on the Steelers, and it's Travis Etienne playing the entire time with the first-team offense with Trevor Lawrence. And Bigsby comes in with the second team. Now, you said on our Fantasy Football Today podcast, you still like Bigsby better than Etienne.
I do.
You never changed it.
Right.
I did change it. I put Bigsby ahead of Etienne. At this point, I don't want to touch the first two guys. I'd rather just take Bashal Tutin with a late-round pick because I think by the middle of the season, he could be a little bit more of a factor than we expect. So, Dave, you speak for Bigsby. You speak for Etienne, Heath.
Bigsby was hyper-efficient last year, way more efficient than Travis Etienne. I know that Etienne played with the first-team offense. Let's see if that happens again this preseason. And if it does, then of course I'll make the switch because then you can't deny it. It looks like Travis Etienne's role is what it is. But they could also end up just doing it where Etienne gets a drive, Bigsby gets a drive, Tutin gets a drive. Now it's a mess, and I don't know if I want any part of that. You mentioned that round 8 might be too soon to take any of these running backs at this point in time. But I like betting on talent when we're talking about the back half of a fantasy draft. And somebody like Bigsby, just the way that he ran last year, and I thought he ran okay in the preseason game, that's somebody that I think fantasy managers could look at and say, that's a good value in the second half of my draft. And then at Etienne, he misses time. I don't think it'll be Tutin right away that gets shot up into the first-team offense. I think it'll be at best a split. At maybe in Bigsby's case, he ends up just dominating touches. And that's somebody I'd love to have on my team if I'm getting him in round 8+.
I mean, if Etienne gets hurt, it might be the Quint Allen in his role because that's the one thing that he has on Bigsby and Tutin so far is that he can handle work in the passing game. If you take a look at the totality of targets for Bigsby in the NFL, it's way more of a blooper reel than it is a highlight reel. And so
that's
even
true.
when Bigsby was going to be the lead rusher, and I still haven't projected for more rush attempts than Travis Etienne, in PPR leagues, the catches really matter, and I don't think there's any doubt that as long as Etienne's healthy, he's going to have that role.
Yeah, I just, the way I adjusted it was I just kind of kept Etienne where he was and just moved Bigsby slightly behind him just because, again, I think it's going to be messy across the board. So if you're going to try and get a piece of this offense, which could be very good, just maybe take the one that's last. We say this about several backfields throughout the course of the last several years. And Tutin is the guy that this regime drafted as opposed to inheriting the other two. All right, last one we're going to talk about, and we don't have to really spend a lot of time on it, unfortunately, is the Steelers, because Kaleb Johnson, I think a lot of us were hoping maybe he would be the lead running back for Pittsburgh this year. He comes in behind Kenneth Gainwell, and Jaylen Warren didn't play in this game. So that's a little concerning that he's not maybe competing for the top job. He may be competing for the third job at this point. Now, I would just say Gainwell, veteran, getting the opportunity to start. As we talk about, don't really look at depth charts, but Johnson also did not look good in that game against the Jaguars. So, Heath, how are you approaching the Steelers' backfield at this point?
I am drafting Jaylen Warren just ahead of Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, and I'm drafting Kaleb Johnson right in the middle of Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. So I do think, and again, most of the stuff I'm talking about is of course PPR related, and non-PPR you probably take Johnson over Warren because Warren's big advantage is he's going to do most of the work in the passing game. We've seen the past few years Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren live in that high-end flex range, and I think that's what this is here. The difference is that when Najee was doing that, he might still catch 30 or 40 passes, and he still had the ability to play on third downs when they needed him to. Early in the year, I'm not sure that's the case for Johnson.
Yeah. Remember how I said 5 minutes ago about we shouldn't overreact to anything in the preseason? I freaked out when I saw Kaleb Johnson not doing his job very well. It goes beyond the pass that bounced off his hands. He wasn't explosive. I really got cold feet on Kaleb Johnson in that preseason game, and he had a decent amount of work in the game. If we see it again, I'd have to move him even further down. For now, Kaleb Johnson is like 2 spots ahead of Jaylen Warren, even in full PPR. But I'm thinking like round 7, 8 turn. Heath's right. Like in the same neighborhood as where you would take your favorite Jaguars running back.
Yep, there was a chance that Kaleb Johnson could have been a number 2 running back for, at least for us, based on prior to the preseason action, and he kind of.
I mean, it could still happen. But
yeah. Needs to see a little bit more, and obviously did not do that with Aaron Rodgers, so keep that in mind. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back and get into some rookie wide receivers who did well in the first preseason action, who may be a little bit concerned, or are we concerned about? We'll talk about that next year on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. We talked about some running back battles that we're looking at from the preseason. Now let's talk about some rookie wide receivers who may have impressed us or may have maybe changed our mind a little bit, positive and negative, from the preseason action. And obviously all eyes in Jacksonville on Travis Hunter. He played 88% of the snaps on offense. He played 100% of the snaps that he was out there on defense. Heath, what did you see from what Travis Hunter did with Trevor Lawrence that may have changed your mind, gave you a little confirmation bias, maybe he's took you the other way. Like, did he impress you enough that you're still comfortable taking him as a number 2 receiver?
No, the thing that, if I was going to be optimistic about something that didn't go well, is I'm not sure how well Travis Hunter is going to tackle NFL players. Like, it might be better to just leave him on the offensive side of the football. There wasn't really anything that happened on offense that changed my mind. Like, this guy is just better than almost everybody at almost everything when it comes to playing those 2 positions. And I love the fact they're giving him a chance to play almost all the time. But I think a low-end wide receivers 2 is where he belongs.
It's a preseason game, but he confirmed a lot of my priors. There were 8 routes that he ran, including a play where he was penalized. Only 2 of them did he go further than 10 yards downfield. That means he's going to certainly begin his career as more of a short and intermediate.
He lined up in the slot
guy.
a lot.
He did.
Yeah.
He did do that. It was still a little bit more outside than in the slot, but Brian Thomas Jr. was in the slot too a little bit. That
happened a lot last year too.
Yep. It was, but just continuing to see them learn all the spots, it's only going to make their offense that much more exciting. I think Travis Hunter's already locked into a role where he could see as many as 7 targets per week, and they're all going to be short area targets. They're not necessarily going to be a lot of downfield throws, but that can still add up over the course of a game, and fantasy managers are going to be excited to draft him. I think he's right on that border between a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 3. I don't mind taking him like right around 60th overall. If that bleeds into early round 6, all the better.
I think by the time more people start drafting, like the hype on Travis Hunter, you're gonna have to take him early in round 5, or you're not gonna get him.
I think 3 receiver leagues, that's 100% for sure. 2 receiver leagues, he may go middle to the end of round 5, but I think top 60 overall, we're going to see Travis Hunter off the board. And he might be the second wide receiver from the rookie class off the board because Tetairoa McMillan is getting a lot of hype as well, and I don't think he did anything to sort of get away from that. Now, he didn't have a lot of catches, obviously, with playing with Bryce Young, but he should have had a touchdown for the Panthers. Dave, when you look at McMillan right now, like, he could be a top 20 fantasy receiver by the time we get to a lot of drafts in terms of where he's getting selected.
Oh, yeah. He's there for me already. And I think he's got potential. Like, Bryce Young's got to stay on point like he did at the end of last season, like he did in the preseason game. But he could be top 12. Like, he could creep in there toward the end of the year. I am excited about him and what he's capable of doing. Every single contested catch is going to go his way. We know that he's going to get a lot of targets in this offense. He should have had a touchdown in the game. He turned his head around just a little bit too late. Bryce Young was on target. This is going to be the big connection in Carolina. This is a team that's going to have to throw a decent amount. I like the way they're using Bryce Young, and McMillan's going to end up getting a lot of passes. I'd easily take him ahead of Travis Hunter as far as those 2 wide receivers go. I don't know if I mind that much going into round 4 to get McMillan in full PPR.
Yeah, we've seen Bryce Young hyper-focus on one target. If he's going to do that this year, this is going to be the guy he's done it with. I think people see the body type maybe coming in and didn't recognize how effective he could be on the underneath routes and the intermediate routes. He looks like a true number 1 wide receiver.
Now, you say that, though, about the focusing on one guy. Adam Thielen's still there, and that was the guy you focused on last year. Jalen Coker, they seem to have a very good rapport going right now.
Yeah.
There's still Xavier Legette, who got thrown out in this game for fighting. Jatavion Sanders had some good moments. Like, there's a lot of different mouths to feed here. So you say they're going to...
Makes the offense interesting.
It makes the offense interesting. I do think there's still going to be a run-centric offense, too. So you say they're going to be more pass-friendly, maybe, because as Bryce Young develops. Are there too many mouths to feed for McMillan to get to his high-end potential?
I don't think so. I don't think any of the other names that you said, if he is who Tetairoa McMillan is, you're not going to have a choice but to give that guy 8 to 9 targets a game.
There's no guys out there that are as tall as Andre the Giant, but not as fast or not as slow as Andre the Giant, because he's pretty fast for a guy who's 6'5". I think he's going to get a ton of targets. I just think he's going to be a red zone threat, third down threat. They're going to use him all over the place, and the game's not too big for him already.
Tampa's got a lot of receivers that they have to get the ball to as well, and one guy's still dealing with an ankle injury. That's Chris Godwin. We don't know when he's going to return. Hopefully he's back early in week 1. But Emeka Egbuka has obviously made a lot of plays so far in training camp and did have the 21-yard catch from Kyle Trask. Baker Mayfield did not play in the Bucs game there against the Titans. So when we look at Emeka Egbuka and the whole big picture of this Tampa Bay passing game with Mike Evans and Godwin and Jalen McMillan, how are we sort of making this work for fantasy managers where they're all going to be potentially successful because they're all going to be drafted maybe in the first 7 rounds? No, not McMillan, the first 3 guys in the first 7 rounds.
Yeah, McMillan's not going to touch round 7 unless something really bad happens. I saw them practice against the Titans. Mike Evans looked amazing. He was separating. It's Titans cornerbacks and it's a practice, so take that for what it's worth. But he looked great. I'm in on him in round 4. That's amazing value because it's not even close to his ceiling. I don't want to reach for Egbuka, but he's another one of these receivers that's just so exciting. He's really, really a great route runner. He's slippery against defensive backs. He's got great hands. And you saw it in the preseason game. There were a couple of routes he ran where he had some really good speed. And I think if Chris Godwin comes back, and I said if he comes back and is his old self, you're going to see Egbuka line up wide. This is going to be an interesting case for him because he used to play wide. He didn't really do it at Ohio State. He told me that. I think that Egbuka, though, does have potential to bust a little bit if Godwin comes back and he's himself. But if Godwin isn't himself, or if it takes him a while to come back, Egbuka is going to be second on this team in targets, and he's going to end up mattering for fantasy as like a number 3 receiver. And if you're drafting that in round 8, it's a tremendous gamble worth taking in the 8th round of your fantasy draft if you need a receiver.
You said on our Fantasy Football Today podcast that you have them very close right now in terms of Godwin and Egbuka. I don't think anybody's drafting Egbuka ahead of Godwin yet. Again, the majority of our drafts haven't happened, so the longer Godwin sits, that might be the case. But are you ready to do that now?
Well, here's what's going to happen is we're going to do a mock draft this week, and we're going to get to round 7, and Chris Godwin's going to be the top wide receiver in my queue, and I'm going to look at it and say, I'd rather have Emeka Egbuka. Yeah. I'm going to take him, and then I'm going to move him ahead. I think the one place I might disagree with Dave a little bit is if Chris Godwin's on the pup to start the year and not there the first 4 weeks, I'm not sure Egbuka is going to be second on this team in targets. Mike Evans has been a guy who produces a ton of fantasy points, generally on a kind of slightly above average number of targets. We saw last year Godwin was the clear top target in the offense. I think what Godwin did the first 6 games of last year is what the ceiling is for Egbuka until Godwin gets back. And once Godwin gets back, I don't know if they'll put the genie totally back in the bottle.
Yeah.
So you're thinking that while Godwin's out, Egbuka will lead the team?
I think he has the potential to, certainly.
He could have a game where he does. That's fair to say.
I think just the one thing to keep in mind is we have not seen all 4 guys together. And even going back to last year, Jaylen McMillan did not become Jaylen McMillan until the end of the season.
Hurt.
Well, it was also when Mike Evans was hurt. You know, we sort of forget that. Like Mike Evans missed 4 games with a hamstring injury last year too. So you have McMillan potentially being a factor. You have Egbuka now maybe a significant factor. They did give Godwin a 3-year contract extension, coming off the year that he had pre-ankle injury. And Evans is still, putting together his Hall of Fame resume, which gets 1,000 yards every season. So is there enough mouths to feed here? And you guys have made the case, admirably so, about Baker Mayfield's regression.
Right.
So either Baker's going to be amazing,
I think that's
everybody's going to eat, or somebody's going to get disappointed here of this 4.
I don't think Jaylen McMillan matters if everybody's healthy. I think that it's
Bucks might tell you something different, though.
They might.
Yeah, because he can fly.
But I do think, and I just think there's too many mouths to feed because of that. Like maybe he has 2 or 3 targets a game, and one of those turns into a touchdown on occasion.
Right.
But he's not going to be a prominent part of the offense if the other 3 guys are healthy. And what we may get is the first month of the season, McMillan is a full-time player because Chris Godwin's not ready, and then Godwin comes back, and McMillan becomes that 4th wide receiver who plays 30% of the snaps.
I also think it's worth thinking about what Heath said. If you're in a draft this weekend, Godwin's still on the PUP list, people aren't going to be excited to draft him. If he falls in drafts, it's amazing value. And even if he starts the year on the PUP list, if you've got an IR spot, you just stuff him in there, and then you see what he's like when he comes back.
That's the problem, is if he's on the PUP list and it's week 5 or week 6 where you find out, this is like the last time Chris Godwin came back from injury, and we're going to get 2 months of him not quite being himself, then I don't know that round 7 is a great value.
No, I'm not. I'm thinking more round 8, round 9. No. But even then, you're right. That is a possible outcome here. And if that happens, then Evans, awesome. Egbuka, awesome. McMillan, DFS guy. Maybe a bye week guy. Chris Godwin, nothing.
Last guy real quick. Luther
and Baker,
Burden.
good.
Luther Burden, 5th on the depth chart, behind DJ Moore, behind Rome Odunze, behind Devin Duvernay, behind Tyler Scott. Are you concerned?
Not yet, no. I think the whole Luther Burden play, and he's always available in round 10, so it's not like you're having to invest very much. It's all about the potential upside. If you're drafting Luther Burden in round 10 or 11, you should recognize that like every player in that range, there is no floor. You may not get to start him. He's got to prove it to Ben Johnson, but the reason it's worth taking him there is if he does prove it, and if he earns that slot role, then he could, I wouldn't go so far as say he could be the best rookie wide receiver, but he could maybe be the best rookie wide receiver.
He certainly could be one of the best surprises. And, based on value, like you said, he's going to go after McMillan, after Hunter, after Egbuka, and maybe some of these other guys, creep ahead of him just based on the usage. But Luther Burden could be the slot receiver for Ben Johnson, which is something that we like. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back to Fantasy Football today, going to do some. Did this change your mind? Did Shedeur Sanders play make you feel a little bit better about Jerry Jeudy? Did Cam Ward's performance make you feel a little bit better? Calvin Ridley. We'll talk about some scenarios that play next year on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. We're going to play out some scenarios here because we like to not overreact to the preseason, but there may be some things that happen in the preseason that could help us make some decisions with some things that are not necessarily related just to that particular player. And what I'm talking about is we'll start with scenario number one. Heath, I'll come to you on this. So Shedeur Sanders played very well. He did that with the second and third team players on the Browns offense. There was no Jerry Jeudy. There was no David Njoku. There was no Cedric Tillman. We like those guys to various degrees as fantasy options.
Right.
And the reason we like them is because Joe Flacco and what he might do for this offense. But after watching Sanders, composed, poised, making plays, led 2 touchdown drives, if he becomes the starter at some point during the season, does that make you feel better about drafting Jeudy, Njoku, and Tillman in their respective spots?
I mean, I'm still going to feel terrible if Joe Flacco is not starting. So I still think there's a bigger gap between Flacco and anything else I might have seen. I thought that Sanders looked more like a round 2 rookie than a round 5 rookie. So I wouldn't necessarily expect him to be good this year, but I do think it makes me feel just a little bit better. I'm still not entirely sure if they replace Joe Flacco that Sanders is the one they'll go with. But there's strength in numbers. So if somebody's now better than Shedeur Sanders looked in that game, then that makes me feel even better about it. So yeah, a little bit safer floor for those guys that I'm pretty much too high on across the board.
Right, because we don't know maybe how long Flacco may start for Cleveland. Cam Ward was looking for Calvin Ridley a lot. So after watching Cam Ward's performance, do you feel better about Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, and especially after watching in the joint practice, because the only guy that he was on the same page with in practice against Tampa, and that's a good defense, was Calvin Ridley. And those two were making plays in practice. You saw it in the game. I think it's going to continue. And it's been a while since we've seen Calvin Ridley be a good fantasy wide receiver. I think he's got the quarterback that will connect with him. I talked earlier about Travis Hunter getting 7 targets per game. That feels like the floor for Calvin Ridley. I think he could hit 8 targets per game because Tennessee is going to be playing from behind quite a bit this year. I think Calvin Ridley is somebody that fantasy managers should consider even in round 5. I think he really can bring back some good value in full PPR.
Yeah, it's a great spot. He's going to be one of the better values because I don't think you have to draft him in round 5
You don't.
based on
That's
ADP.
the best part.
And so he could actually return a lot of good production based on what his role is for the Titans. J.J. McCarthy did not have Justin Jefferson. He's not going to have Jordan Addison for the first 3 games of the season, but McCarthy was looking for Addison and looked composed in his first preseason action since coming back from the injury. So watching J.J. McCarthy, do you feel better about Justin Jefferson and better, obviously, about Jordan Addison when he does return?
I feel better about the entire Vikings offense after watching J.J. McCarthy because I was fairly confident that he was going to be an acceptable passer after what they were able to do with Sam Darnold last year, but just that little bit of action showed me, yes, he's competent. Now, could he be good or even great? I think that's still a possibility, but this fixed the floor for me a little bit. I still have Justin Jefferson as my number 3 wide receiver behind Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, but I might get Jefferson a little bit closer to those 2 wide receivers instead of back with the pack. And then I think it's also a good thing for TJ Hawkinson, who has a chance at a very fast start with Addison suspended for the start of the year.
And just something, I bring this up on our podcast a lot. So Addison's out for the first 3 games of the season. Week 4, they get Pittsburgh, which is not going to be an easy matchup, especially we don't know what McCarthy will look like. He's looked good, but we'll see what that means. Week 5, Cleveland should be a spot where you might want to use Jordan Addison. Then week 6, they have their bye week. You may not get the best of Jordan Addison until week 7, and it stinks because McCarthy was looking for Addison quite a bit in this preseason game. Dave, Kyler Murray had 1 incompletion. It was an interception.
Ugly incompletion.
It was very ugly incompletion.
He was weird against Kansas City in that game. So.
But watching him against the Chiefs, and we're getting a lot of questions still about Marvin Harrison. Does watching Kyler Murray's performance make you feel better about Marvin Harrison or a little bit worse about Marvin?
This is another player that I don't want to overreact to. He said after the game that he maybe was just a little too amped up. And after the interception, he did cool off, and he looked like Kyler Murray. Well, good Kyler Murray. Not this wacky Kyler Murray that we saw in the preseason game. So, no, I'm not ready to bail on Kyler. I still think he's a top 12 fantasy quarterback, and I'm not ready to bail on Marvin Harrison. He's a top 18 type of fantasy wide receiver. I do hope that the Cardinals use Harrison closer to the line of scrimmage a little bit more because he just doesn't have that speed that you look for. It's a little weird for a receiver that has so many accolades. He can do almost everything else that you ask, but I don't know how many times he's going to run away from defensive coverage. But that target volume should be there for him this year. It should be better than it was last year. Scored 8 touchdowns last year. Maybe there's a chance he finishes as a top 15 to 20 type of wide receiver.
So we talked about Shedeur Sanders, and if he does have the chance to start for the Browns, we're basing a lot of our evaluation on Joe Flacco. For the Giants, we're basing a lot of our evaluation on Russell Wilson, some Malik Neighbors. But Jaxon Dart looked pretty good coming in. when you look at Malik Neighbors, I know you're a big Giants guy.
Right.
When you look at Malik Neighbors, you feel better about his situation based on how Dart looked in case there's a quarterback change at some point during the season?
Yeah, because I think that Russell Wilson's going to be the unquestioned starter of this team for as long as they can fool themselves into believing they have some chance at contending. But when that goes out the window, then Jaxon Dart may get a chance, and that there's a little bit of risk that if you're week 13, week 14 heading into the fantasy playoffs, and then this new guy takes over and all of a sudden Malik Neighbors sees his fantasy points per game fall off. So it was encouraging from Dart. I still think it's a little bit of a risk, but it's not as big a risk for me as Puka Nakua's situation with Matthew Stafford right now. So I'll still take Neighbors ahead of Nakua, but I was encouraged by what I saw from Dart.
He looked good. Again, you want to see poise, you want to see confident, you want to see some big boy throws. He had the one on the touchdown. So Dart hopefully will just do what Russell Wilson will do, is throw the ball to Malik Neighbors as much as possible. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, it's all your questions. Ask FFT. Send them to us on X using that hashtag. Any social media platforms, use that hashtag, AskFFT. We're going to help you with your fantasy decisions next here on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. It's your questions the rest of the way. And Hipster Doofus21 wants to know, is Bowers worth his ADP with how deep wide receiver appears to be this year, or would it be better to wait for Hockenson or Ingram and grab a top tight end in the second round? Heath, I told you this before the show, that on CBS Sports, Bowers' ADP is 25th overall. I'd take that all day, but I know you take him at the back end of round 1, beginning of round 2. So would you rather have Bowers or receiver and take Hockenson and Ingram?
I would rather have Bowers. I would like to really have Brock Bowers or Trey McBride this year and then just not think about tight end ever again.
Yeah, Hockenson, a little bit safer. Ingram, a little bit more concerning. So if you have the chance to get Bowers, again, on our site, do so at the back end of round 2 for sure. Next question. Marshall wants to know, 10-team Superflex, half PPR, keeping Nico Collins and Chase Brown. The third keeper would be Trey McBride in the 9th or Drake May in the 14th. Dave Richard, what are you doing?
Oh, my goodness. I love both of these guys. In a Superflex, I think I'm still going to take McBride ahead of May. But it's close. Give me McBride.
I would like to know what value Nico Collins and Chase Brown have, because I would like to keep Drake May in the 14th round of a Superflex league and keep McBride in the 9th round as well. And then depending on where Nico and Brown are. But yeah, I would probably go with McBride also just because it's 10 teams. All right, next question. Josh wants to know, keeper PPR league, Bucky Irving for a 16th round or Chase Brown for a 9th round, already keeping Jamar Chase for a first round pick. So high on Chase Brown though. So Heath, when you look at it, would you rather have both Bengals at the cost of Chase Brown or Jamar Chase and Bucky Irving?
Well, I have Bucky Irving ahead of Chase Brown, and so if you can get him 7 rounds later, I would definitely take Bucky Irving. They're very similar backs in that they were kind of surprises last year. We got half the season sample sizes where they were elite. We're hoping they'll be elite again. I'm going with Bucky.
Bucky at that cost does make a lot more sense. Andy wants to know, 10-team PPR keeper league, would you keep Neighbors in the 5th round, Malik Neighbors in the 5th round, Dave, Jayden Daniels in the 7th round, or Brian Thomas Jr. in the 11th?
And you can only keep them for one season. I would keep Neighbors in the 5th. I know that there's better value for Brian Thomas Jr. in the 11th, but Neighbors has wide receiver 1 overall upside. It's a great deal either way.
I would keep Brian Thomas just based on the value, but again, it's hard to argue because Neighbors is great. Brian Thomas, though, 6 rounds better, could be just as good, and the cost would be that much better. All right, great show, guys. Make sure you send us your questions. We'll be answering them on our social media platforms. We'll be answering them on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. You can find us wherever podcasts are available. We're on YouTube as well. Check out the QR code there. We are helping you dominate your fantasy leagues better than everybody else. For Heath Cummings, for Dave Richard, I'm Jamie Eisenberg. Thanks for watching Fantasy Football Today.